position to rent your white truck to work.
I feel probably what you thought.
That's why I can't pull it off.
All right, we're live.
Make the arrangements. Listen.
Greetings, everybody, and thank you for coming to this live stream episode of The Remnant. I am your host, Archbishop D.E. Chase, and this is my dearly beloved and esteemed guest, Reverend, the most Reverend Archbishop Sterling Lands II, Ph.D. Say hello to the people, please.
I greet you in the precious name of Yeshua HaMashiach, and I'm so pleased to be here with my brother.
Amen. Brothers and sisters, we're in a very tumultuous time here in the United States. We're dealing with the things that we have not seen since the 50s and the 60s. And now seemingly what has been made equitable for both sides is now being reneged upon, especially by Florida, who has decided that they will teach that slavery benefited slaves and the descendants thereof. My question is, how did oppression, how did separation from your family, your motherland, how did torture benefit of people who were enslaved? I mean, to me, that's a ridiculous concept, and that just shows you where this country intends to go if we do not unite and go out and vote. But Archbishop, what are your thoughts on this whole notion of Florida deciding that they're not going to teach the truth about slavery, but rather they're going to teach a concocted fairy tale version that it was equitable for both sides?
Well, I don't have a reason for them saying that other than it is racism and white supremacy. But I guess if we really wanted to become ideologues, we could back up far enough and see how God is able to take any situation and use it for his benefit. Well, let me shut this down. And if we did that, we would be able to say that slavery met his objective, whether we agree with it or not. And that is, it made us a lot stronger people. Now, that's hard to deal with if you're suffering the results and the that which has resulted from slavery. It's hard for us to see that, but I don't think that God is nearsighted, and I don't think that he's farsighted. I think that he sees all things at the same time, and his plan is and always has been greater than our plan. And although we may not agree with the pain we suffered, he has a way of purifying a people through the furnace of suffering. And I think that that's exactly what happened here. So it's, if we're going to really get down to the bottom line, I think we'd have to deal with whether or not we're going to take man's view, or if we're going to try to get far enough back to see God's view. And of course, we can never see the full view that God has anyway. But that's not what Florida had in mind. I don't see Florida being that deep in understanding the ways of God. I see that as being a group of people were trying to satisfy their ego needs for white supremacy, and to try and show that even though we were hurting you, it was to benefit you. And with that in mind, there is no benefit for us.
Well, with that said, I think we have to view this in light not subjectively,
Right.
which is the tendency for our people to go, which is subjective route. However, we have to look at this objectively. Now, if we're going to look at it objectively,
forgive me for this noise. I'm seeming to have something that is trying its best to stop this conversation, but it doesn't work.
Well, it's already thwarted in the name of Yahushua Mashiach. But I think one of the things that we really have to look at is, in what way do we as a people, and see, it's one thing to, individuals, but we as a people, in what way have we benefited? To be honest with you, I don't really personally see any benefits, because of the fact that we're still faced with overseers or officers who find it necessary to brutalize our young men, to shoot unarmed people dead in the street, and the public at large. Just look at Ahmaud Arbery last year, that trial, where the populace, the slave catching, slave owning populace thinks that it's all right for them to go and hunt us down in order to put us back into subjection. So, then we're dealing with, coinciding with this issue of Florida rejecting the truth about slavery. We also have the Supreme Court ruling that what is it called? Affirmative action is unconstitutional, and therefore not allowed to be practiced anymore. Now, so if we're going to say we have free enterprise, okay, and if we're going to talk about true freedom, true liberty, and true justice, I believe that we have to get to a point where we either separate from them,
yes,
and establish our own, because under their dynamic, I don't see any benefit. I don't see any position of where we as a people are going to really come into our own. And we also have to look at every time that we did come into our own, okay, we did establish our own cities and banks and so on and so forth, that the white populace did whatever they thought was necessary to take us out, going in and massacring thousands of people. And they call this justified under their rules of morality.
Yes.
So Archbishop, I might be a little crazy, but how do we grasp a hold of this? And especially for our younger generation, how are they going to grasp a hold of this and see that the cards are not stacked fairly, number one. Number two is they're doing everything and anything they can to make sure that we do not achieve. And are we going backwards or are we progressing?
Well, the illegality of being able to discriminate on the basis of skin color, that is denying access to employment, denying access to housing, denying access to public accommodations, to denying access to professional growth and development within corporations. That all leads to a colorblind conclusion. Colorblind conclusions that the social and economic disparities between racial groups are due to reasons other than racism or discrimination. So the fact that you took affirmative action and early on and made it illegal to discriminate on the basis of skin color, that led us to see color, to see from the lens of our society a colorblind conclusion. And it led us to conclude that the social and economic disparities between racial groups are due to reasons other than racism and discrimination. So if you couple that with the idea of neoliberalism, where the functions of the market have presumably rid societies of racism, irrationality, have presumably rid society of colorblind, at least color being an area that could cause separation, then you end up with what one writer calls the illusion of inclusion. The illusion of inclusion. So the next generation growing up under that mindset, they will be unable to see the detrimental impact of racism, white supremacy in their generation, and they won't be able to project beyond their generation because they have nothing to refer back to. And if you don't know your past, then of course your future is basically doomed to be whatever it is and wherever it was. So being able to set aside the historic and present day racist practices that produce and racialize equality, European Americans then are able to make the claim that African Americans and other racial minorities are the ones who culturally construct their own disadvantage. So then our current generations, and I use the term in plural, are beginning to embed, they're beginning to take in, they're beginning to ingest the idea that the reason they are where they are is because something that they have failed to do or that they're failing to do today. And the victim becomes the cause of the victimization. That's where we are. And that's no, we don't like it, but that's a very clever move on the part of Florida to do that and say, no, we're just not going to talk about race, period, because race is no longer an issue. That's a very smart move. It was not a very smart move on the part of the Supreme Court on the surface to disband the concepts of affirmative action, unless you read the script that's underneath the script. And that script is the reason it's being disbanded, quote, is because it's no longer a requirement. All people are, quote, equal. Therefore, we don't need an affirmative action program to bring one group in or out, because that now tends to discriminate against another group. And since we're all equal, no one needs that type of a step or a stair step to make it in this society. Well, you know as well as I do that that's a lie. But if you can sell the lie, then to the people who are buying the lie, they see it as truth. And I'm afraid that that's what our generations are beginning to see. And I hear often talking, particularly young college students, they're bought the lie that, you know, everything is hunky-dory. And so All I need to do is to go and do my very best, and I will get the very best. They will later discover that it's not the case, but they won't understand why it's not the case because they'll see themselves as being the cause of their own failures.
You know,
I know I said a bunch there. I
no,
apologize.
no. I was right there with you, and I think part of what we're missing is you know there's some scriptural aspects that are involved.
Yes.
Okay, and this country is known for reneging on its promises, especially when it comes to people of color. You know,
Yes.
Native Americans, African Americans, if there is such a thing, so on and so forth. Reparations have never been paid to the people that actually endured the hardship. Rather, the people that counted the slaves as property, as chattel, got reparations. Now, when we deal with this, and we deal scripturally, we find out that the sins of the father go back 7-8 generations.
Yes.
It prophetically speaking, you know, the country is bringing upon itself the wrath of God that I don't believe anyone will be able to stand. That's number one. Number two is to deny the fact of systemic racism, to deny the fact of unjust practices even today in housing, in you know, neighborhood setup and so on and so forth, would be, to me, that's living a lie.
Of course.
You know, and so where do we go? How do we let our government know that we as a people are no longer going to put up with their nonsense? And see, that the problem we have is I don't think people can actually do that because they're afraid. Okay, they're afraid of things. They're afraid of the retaliation that the government may or may not impose. They're afraid of the power structures that are in place. And as a people, I think we have to stand against it, you know, and we have to stand, we really have to stand up and fight the good fight. We have to go and we have to endure this struggle.
Yes.
And by the same token, with all of this, we also have to look at currently we're dealing with a situation where the United States government has felt it necessary to go in and be a moral and ethical judge, jury, and executioner in you know all over Africa by sending Kamala Harris with an ultimatum to accept LGBTQ and to have these countries who are who predate America by thousands of years, okay, to go in there and to make demands, holding purse strings with ultimatums, as if you do not accept LGBTQ, we're going to cut the purse strings. Now we have a situation where we have to really look at what's going on in Africa, is because both Russia and China are in Africa and they're making friends. Russia just recently forgave, I think it was $20 billion of debt that the African nations owed to them. Forgave it, when the United States has yet to do anything except for ask for more. And then to go in and say, hey, listen, you better accept this LGBTQ agenda or the little monies that we give you, because we're raping you, robbing you, and stealing from you everything else. But the little money that we give you is going to be held back. What do you say about that, sir? And what's your thoughts?
Well, a couple of things. I was on a highway in Sierra Leone a year or so ago. Well, not quite a year ago, but it's somewhere between 10 and 12 months ago. And great highway. So I asked my host, how was it built? And he said the Chinese built it. And of course, there's a toll at X number of kilometers apart. And I said, well, who gets the money from the tolls? He says, the Chinese get the money. They built the road and therefore they get the money. And I suspect that that's one of the ways that they're paying for it. Now, I got no problem with any of that. But when I look at the infrastructure that's being laid out, it's obvious to me that many nations are investing in Africa, but it's not designed to help the African. It's designed to take advantage of the resources that Africa has to offer. Now, if America was really on its game and was playing the same game that Europe has played for the last X hundred years, they would be in Africa also trying to get the resources, but not by raping and pillaging, but by doing things and, you know, setting up infrastructure. They need power generation facilities. They need drilling harnesses. They need water dams. I mean, they need things that are there, that should be there. And to some small degree, I saw some of that happening in Ghana with the George Bush Highway between Accra and headed up toward Dodowa. Now, here's my whole point. The fact that Kamala Harris was sent over with an ultimatum that either you accept the LGBTQ mandate or these dollars could dry up, and I'm paraphrasing the whole conversation, of course, that says that somebody is asleep at the wheel. They're not paying attention to what the competition is doing. And ultimately, America will lose out, because if Russia gets a good stronghold, if China gets a good stronghold, they're both big enough and they're both strong enough to tell America to get out. And so we could be looking at World War III from the perspective of being a weaker element. And we're going to try to bring others in with us, but those are two giants, man. And so giants have to meet giants, but if we're no longer a giant, then it's going to be very difficult to recover from that. So I think it was a dumb thing to have the vice president go over with that message, one. Two, I think it's a dumb thing for our country to even be sending that out, because it's showing us as being very, very weak. And over time, it will cause us to deteriorate from within. And we will be no better than Rome was when Rome imploded. It was not anything that happened from the outside. It was an inside job. That's where we're headed right now. So all Africa could do, if they had the right people in charge, was just stop for a moment and wait, because this place will definitely implode.
Do you think that it would be wise on the continent of Africa for the several African quote unquote nations to unite as one nation, one people, one military, one government with one currency, so that collectively they can compete in this modern world, number one, And number two is, it's all over Africa. Russia is helping these nations train militaristically,
Yes.
And so, but do you think that would be a wise move
Well,
for the African nations to unite as the United States of Africa?
no doubt in my mind, it would be one of the greatest moves that could be made. However, I think that that's a millennium away if the Lord delays his coming. I don't see that happening because the nations are treated as if they are wards, and even the two larger countries who are over there, they don't want that either. The moment you start talking about a united continent, the United Nations of Africa, the moment you start to have that conversation, it upsets all of the people who have other ideas for how to get resources out of Africa, because suddenly Africa becomes the user of its own resources. And the minute that happens, you will no longer be able to treat Black people anywhere in the world the way you treat them, because now you have a country that is united and will say, don't ever do that to another Black person. And that's not in front of us right now. But is it an idea that would be worthwhile? Absolutely, no doubt in my mind about that.
Well, I thank you. It's we're coming up on our time at this point in time. Please join us next Thursday at 6 p.m. Eastern for the next installment of the Remnant. Remember this, mighty people of God, that we are the ones who were created. We are the ones who the Ruach Kodesh, the very living, breathing, moving Spirit of God, was blown into our nostrils and we became living souls. And we must understand that together we can achieve victory, but divided, we will definitely continue to fall. Stay strong, love one another, and keep hope alive.
Know that God is on our side.
Yes.